And good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Yellow Jacket Coaches Show with head coach Steve Bordeaux. I'm John Hockaday, and I'll be your host for tonight's show. Lee County fell to 6-1 overall, 2-1 in the Sandhills 3A, 4A conference last Friday night as Lee County lost to Pinecrest by a 40-23 score. Lee County will try to rebound this week as they host the Richmond County Raiders. We remind you that our Coaches Show this season airs live every Tuesday night right here at 7 o'clock on WFJA Sports, and these shows will re-air 1 hour before game time every Friday night. Video of the Coaches Show will post on Wednesdays on our homepage on the WFJA website and our Facebook page as well. Our Coaches Shows each week are brought to you by a great group of sponsors, and we'd like to recognize those sponsors: Jones Printing Company, Wilkinson Cadillac Chevrolet Buick and GMC, Domino's, the Dairy Bar and Flame Restaurants, Farm Bureau of Tramway, Sheriff Brian Estes, and Fix It Plumbing. We're going to take a short break. We're going to bring in head coach Steve Bordeaux, and we're going to talk some Yellow Jacket football. We'll be back right after these messages.
WFJA would like to thank the following advertisers for bringing you the Lee County Coaches Show: Jones Printing Company, Domino's, WilkinsonCars.com, Sheriff Brian Estes, Farm Bureau of Tramway, the Dairy Bar and Flame Restaurants, Fix It Plumbing, and Brick Capital Video.
And we do welcome you back, everyone, to the Yellow Jacket Coaches Show, and we have head coach Steve Bordeaux here with us in the booth. And coach, this past week, Pinecrest came to Lee County. Final score 40-23. First loss of the year for Lee County, and it's never fun. I know that. And let's talk a little bit about the game. Your thoughts on how Lee County played this past Friday night?
Yeah, not something we're used to or wanting to get used to. First off, hats off to Pinecrest, their staff, their kids, their coaches, their players, everybody. They came in and played a near mistake-free football game. And, that was kind of what we thought they would do. We knew that they were a team that didn't make a whole lot of mistakes. And we knew that if we made mistakes, they're going to have opportunities to make plays off of them. And that's kind of what happened when we didn't do our job in some situations.
Well, it was a great atmosphere, a good crowd. I thought Pinecrest brought a great crowd as well, and it was great to see the Lee County fans out, and love the atmosphere, but the result obviously was not what we wanted this past week. Pinecrest got off to a quick start, 13-0, and looked like it knocked the Yellow Jackets back a little bit. Your thoughts about how we got started?
Yeah, and I would, if we start a different way, maybe our crowd is able to get into the game and all those different things. You have home field advantage because we did have a great crowd. We had 100, 150 youth kids out there that play football in the county. So that was great to see all of that. The way the game started, I guess is those first two series were about as drawn up as good for Pinecrest as possible. We got a couple of situations, what we call money downs. In the game when it's a chance, whoever wins that play is basically going to win that series, and you win several money downs, you're going to win the game. On that first series, we counted 3 different money downs. There were third or fourth and short, and they won every one of them in those first 2 series. We have a third and 1 on our first series, and they stop us. And that's what leads to a 13-0 lead.
After you finished the game, of course, we talked briefly after the game, but I know you had the weekend to go back and break it down. What were some of the issues that you saw during the game, good or bad, that you prioritized this week in practice that maybe an area where you felt like we need to be better?
Yeah, so I guess good and bad. One thing that I felt like in the first series or two that I thought we were getting moved up front, because that is something that happened last year when we played Pinecrest. They moved us off the ball up front. That was not the case. Our D-line actually played really well, and we were missing tackles at the next level. So a lot of things in our defense are set up for the D-line to be in their gaps and contain their gaps and make things bounce to linebackers, or maybe it's a safety, depending on what happens. So that's something we saw. We missed some tackles that we usually make, and which led to them scoring more points than we usually see giving up.
Of course, I've been doing this for so long. I've watched football for 30 years in high school, and I always evaluate the line of scrimmage, those first 2 or 3 series, and it seemed like I thought we matched up well. And as you said, I thought defensively our guys were holding their own at the line. I didn't feel like we controlled it as well with our offensive line as we have our first 6 games, obviously, but this was a much different defense we saw.
Yeah, I feel like early on in the game. Offensive line wise, it took them a little bit to I guess embrace that same physicality that Pinecrest was delivering with their linebackers and their D line. They did a good job of moving around, and as the game went on, the offensive line picked it up and ended up moving the ball effectively throughout, and just struggled to finish, whether it be a turnover or drops.
When you go back, Coach, and look at all the numbers from the game, total yardage and first downs, and it was remarkably similar. Both teams around 350 yards of offense. They were a little more, we were a little less, 20 first downs to 18. But the turnovers that Lee County had, I thought were huge in the game. And I thought the fake punt was really a backbreaker.
So looking through the game and just picking out those big time plays. If you find 10 big plays in the game, whoever wins the most of those probably gonna win the game. I think they probably won 8 of the 10. We fumble the ball as we're driving right before halftime. At that point, it's a 20-3 game. We're driving, so I'm gonna say that we're gonna be 20-10. Instead, we fumble and they score on a slant, a good play by them, tipped up in the air, bobble. We were in decent coverage, and he goes and scores. So I look at that being a 14-point swing, and really the same thing on that punt fake. They did a good job executing it. It's 4th and 25. He bobbles the ball again, and the ball bounces into his hands. He goes and scores. Both of those are situations that are really game-breaking, game-making type plays. But they did a good job of putting themselves in situations to make those calls, and we did a bad job in allowing them to dictate in a closer game. Some of those calls don't happen.
Coach, looking at some of the individual performances for Lee County on Friday night, we came into this game, and B.J. Brown's been such a focal part of our offense. 1,264 yards, I think, was the number coming into the game. 108 yards in this game. Didn't get as many carries as he has in some of the other games, but still a nice game from B.J. Brown. I think we're spoiled a little bit to think that 108 yards is not as great a night as it ought to be, but he was still a big weapon for Lee County, and a couple of the receivers. I thought Kendall Morris was good for the Jackets receiving, and of course Jaden Hill as well.
Yeah, always looking at the receiving group and seeing that 4 and 5 guys catching the ball is always something that's a goal every week. It means that defensively a team has to line up and respect everybody, and it's not just they're going to force the ball to this guy. We don't have that type of offense. BJ was able to get a couple catches too and get some yards. But I think, like you said, sometimes I want 250, 300 yards rushing the game too. But against really good teams, those runs that might be 20-yard gains might be 10-yard gains. And those runs that you might be 10, it might be 5. If we can consistently average 5 yards a carry, though, those things do add up to first downs as long as we can protect the football.
Mark Schlesinger, I thought, had a really nice game as well. 17 of 25, 203 yards, 3 touchdowns. A couple of those really good catches, or particularly that first one, a great catch by Jaden Hill in the corner of the end zone. But I thought Mark was really solid.
Mark did. Talking with him this week, there's a couple plays, of course, that everybody would say they want to have back. But overall, 8 incompletions in the game, 4 drops, and 2 of them he threw away. So that's a very efficient night. That's what we need. He did a good job with his legs as well, stretching, even when he wasn't necessarily running the ball in our RPO game, making them play him to allow Kendall or Isaiah, whoever it may be, to catch a pass and get downfield.
And, we always talk about eliminating big plays, and it's hard. I don't know what the formula is for eliminating big plays, but they had a couple of really big ones that hurt Lee County. And, when you're scoring from 63, 67 yards, and that does I know it's got to kick the defense right in the teeth.
Yeah, but, I feel like if we make people consistently get first downs down the field, we're going to be a type of team that eventually they're going to run out of first downs they can get. Whether we're going to force them to punt or hopefully make them punt, but if not, attempt a field goal, which we were able to do in the second half. They get 2 field goals in the fake punt in the second half. So defensively, we played much better in the second half. We just put ourselves in a situation where we had to play even better because of our first half performance.
Coach, a lot of things, I guess, changed around the league. We went into Friday night with Lee County and Pinecrest tied atop the conference at 2-0. Of course, now Pinecrest at 3-0, Lee County at 2-1, and Richmond County, who lost their first 3 games of the year, has now come on and sits at 3-1 in the conference. They've played one more game than Lee County. Of course, Scotland also at 2-1, but Richmond County this past week beat Union Pines 34-23. That game a little tighter than I thought it would be, and Southern Lee led Hope County at the half, but ended up losing that one 31-7. And of course, the Cavaliers off this week. Hope County will be at Union Pines. Two big games in this conference. The Big Four that I keep hearing people say: Lee County hosting Richmond, and Pinecrest hosting Scotland. So those 2 games will determine a lot.
Yeah, definitely so. And it's the type of games that you want to play. I'm saying that's what we talked to the boys about last week, this week. These are exciting weeks. The weather's cooling off. The crowds are going to be big. It's going to be a good buzz in the air. It's exciting football. And talking about going back and watching film, I guess we're talking a little bit about this week's game, but Richmond Union Pines returns open and kickoff on a little, somewhat of what I call a trick play, and they score late in the game. So it might be closer on the scoreboard than it really was.
Also quickly before we go to break here, do want to mention again the conference standings. Pinecrest the top at 3-0, Richmond at 3-1, Lee County at 2-1, along with Scotland County, Hope County at 2-2, Union Pines 0-3, and Southern Lee at 0-4. And right now we're going to take a break and hear from our Coaches Show sponsors, and we'll be back with more right after this.
WFJA would like to thank the following advertisers for bringing you the Lee County Coaches Show: Jones Printing Company, Domino's, WilkinsonCars.com, Sheriff Brian Estes, Farm Bureau of Tramway, the Dairy Bar and Flame Restaurants, Fix-It Plumbing, and Brick Capital Video.
And we do welcome you back to the Yellow Jacket Coaches Show with head coach Steve Bordeaux. I'm John Hockaday, filling in for Keith Womack tonight. And Coach, it's that time that we always like to recognize some of those that had those special performances on Friday night. And of course, the Norman Financial Group always provides a certificate to the players that Keith and I select for the offensive and defensive players of the game. And of course, our offensive player of the game, Jaden Hill, 5 catches, made a great catch for our first touchdown this past Friday night. 2 touchdowns total. Yeah,
Jaden, sophomore receiver, getting out there and making plays. Really good when the ball's in the air. 50-50 balls, as people like to call it. He wins those a lot. The one thing that I've been excited to see as Jaden's developing as a receiver is, and obviously we run the football a decent amount. He is bought into blocking, and he's figured out that the more he works in the blocking situation, it only makes his routes easier to run, and wears that DB out a little bit. And both of those things go hand in hand, and I expect him to continue to have some games like that.
Well, he's one that I guess we saw play for the first time this year as a sophomore on the varsity, and it seems like he's just gotten a little bit better every week.
Yeah, a little bit more confidence, a little more comfortable. He can line up in a couple different spots at receiver, and he can be a dynamic athlete for us.
In our Norman Financial Group, Bubba Subs Pizza Player of the Game defensive side, Braden Kirkland. And, we kept calling his name on defensive stops a lot. Not the biggest guy on your defensive line, but I thought he played really, really well.
Yeah, Braden's a hardworking kid, scrappy, tough, 4-year guy who came in and was a lineman and, bought into lifting weights and doing the things he wanted to do. And does a really good job of listening to the things that Coach Green and our defensive coaching staff ask him to do, and that's why he was able to make some of those plays.
And we also each Tuesday night we announce our Wilkinson Cadillac Chevrolet Buick GMC coaches player of the game, and I'll let you have the honors for that.
Yeah, so the coaches, we went with Mark Schlesinger this week. Very efficient game, throwing three touchdown passes, being effective with his legs, and continuing to develop and expand our offense. And really, I hope that continues, obviously, as we move forward.
Well, congratulations to all 3 of these, Jaden Hill, Braden Kirkland, and Mark Schlesinger, for being the players of the game for this past week. Coach, let's turn our attention to Richmond County. And I know that most people that are familiar with Richmond County shocked to see the season start like it did, 0-3 right out of the bat. Of course, they played 3 of probably the best 10 teams in the state of North Carolina, but they couldn't score,
right,
and really had a tough start. They have turned that around. They're now 4-4 on the season. More importantly, they're 3-1 in the conference. Let's talk a little bit about Richmond County.
Yeah, I think as the seasons went on, they had some inexperienced guys early, and they've gotten some experience. They had a little bit of turnover on some coaching staff, and the same thing with the coaches. They have looks like they've gelled it together. Especially looking at the offensive stats the last few weeks, they put up some bigger numbers and some more yards, and obviously most importantly they're scoring points. When it comes down to it, the quarterback's a dynamic athlete, can stretch the field with his legs, has a good arm. He's very mobile. He'll be a kid that we have to account for, and they're running back. They have a couple running backs that are talented kids that if we don't go run to the football, they can break one at any point.
Well, having seen Richmond County over the years, I always see big linemen, and I'm sure we'll be in store for that this Friday night.
Definitely. On both sides of the ball, they have big linemen, especially on the offensive line. They're about foot to foot. It looks like on the offensive line, they're just trying to mash people, move people out the way. They have a really good offensive line coach, and I know that he was born and bred in Richmond, and I know that he's got those boys licking their chops to run the football.
Well, when you look at Richmond, and I had a chance to go through the stat sheet today, and around 2,400 yards total offense. Well, there's 1,900 yards that's, I think, attributed to 2 players. The quarterback, number 5, McBride, will be watching him. 945 yards passing. He's also run for another, 152 yards. And then, of course, number 1, Spencer, the running back, 917 yards, 10 touchdowns. He's also their leading receiver. So, number 1 and number 5, have you got those 2 numbers ingrained in everybody's head yet?
Yeah, everybody needs to know, especially where those guys are at and where they're lined up. Number 5 is going to be lined up at quarterback, so it's going to be pretty easy probably to find him most of the time. But they do a good job offensively of using space, making you play the whole field, and they do a good job when they're in open space. At any point, they can break one.
Now, what kind of offensive sets will we see Richmond County set up in?
So they'll have some, spread sets with 1 running back and 4 receivers, and then often they'll bring in a wing or an H-back type guy. Sometimes it's a real big defensive lineman who's athletic enough to go out and run a route or 2. But in that set, they do like to pound the football, but it really become almost 6 offensive linemen. Just one of them can go out for a pass.
Let's look at the other side of the ball for Richmond County. I remember last year, in fact, I can't remember the young man's name, the nose guard that went to East Carolina. Yep. I know he's probably gone. But what have they got? I'm sure there's still plenty in the cupboard.
Yeah, definitely. They have a couple pretty talented defensive linemen and in general defensive football players. Big number 94 is a kid up front that has showed up on film, and he's also the guy that comes in and plays on their wing when they do that on offense. In the secondary, they're very athletic. They challenge people. They're going to play man coverage for the most part, a little bit of zone stuff, but for the most part man coverage, and just kind of challenge you to out-athlete them because they're going to try to be aggressive.
Well, I noticed on their defensive sheets, number 44 and 34 are their leading tacklers. I'm assuming those are both linebackers.
And 44 is another guy that rotates in at the wing position. So.
Okay. All right. Offensively for the Jackets, we've built our attack on the ground. I assume we'll continue right on with that, regardless of what we see on the other side. Yeah,
we're always going to. If we can run the football, we're always going to run the football. Teams are going to try to pack the box and effectively, I think limit or try to slow down and target our running game. We have to be able to continue to stretch the field as we're able to do as the game went on last week. And I expected us to be able to do similar things this week.
A lot of the fans that have been football fans here in Sanford for 30, 40 years like I have, they know what kind of crowd Richmond County is going to bring. And again, I was pleased with the crowd that we had last week, and there were so many new people there that had been calling me during the week, saying, hey, I got to come see these guys. Well, I hope that what happened last Friday night will not keep them from coming this Friday. We need them there.
Yeah.
Richmond's going to bring a good crowd. This is going to be a great ball game, and the Yellow Jackets need that fan support.
No doubt. Week in and week out in our conference, it really becomes a playoff atmosphere. that's the great thing about our conference, and it helps us, build the track and ready for those things as we get into November and hopefully into December. But there's nothing better than Paul B. Gay Stadium being packed and a Jacket crowd going crazy. So we'll be prepared to do a good job to get those guys excited, everybody in the crowd, and hopefully they'll bring the juice.
I do want to mention just one thing coming up this Friday night. We'll be honoring Charlie Spivey,
Yes,
Charlie Spivey night, and I can't think of a better game to do it for than Richmond County, because I know that was, of course, it was Rockingham back in those days, but that was one of the teams that Charlie competed against. Really, really tough. I mean, Charlie was a tough competitor in every sport, and well deserved to see him honored this Friday.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Coach Spivey's a top-notch person. Obviously, he was an outstanding coach, and getting honored for getting inducted into the NCHSAA Hall of Fame, which is very limited on the amount of people that are in it. And he's still working and doing things at the school to keep our stadium nice and beautiful. That grass will be beautiful on Friday. All hats off on the grass to Coach Spivey.
Well, we see different stadiums every week, and it's still always the prettiest field of anywhere we go, and Charlie is certainly responsible for that. Certainly want to remind everybody we're still on GoFan.com for tickets this Friday night for the Richmond County game here at home. Love to see you there. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back. You've been listening to the Coaches Show, Yellow Jacket Coaches Show here with Steve Bordeaux. We'll be right back.
WFJA would like to thank the following advertisers for bringing you the Lee County Coaches Show: Jones Printing Company, Domino's, WilkinsonCars.com, Sheriff Brian Estes, Farm Bureau of Tramway, the Dairy Bar and Flame Restaurants, Fix It Plumbing, and Brick Capital Video.
And we do welcome you back to WFJA Sports. Want to thank all of you for listening to the Yellow Jacket Coaches Show tonight. Certainly want to thank head coach Steve Bordeaux for coming by and visiting with us for just a few minutes. Also want to remind you that this Coaches Show will re-air 1 hour before game time this coming Friday night. And the video of our Coaches Show tonight we'll post tomorrow on the homepage of the WFJA website and the WFJA Facebook page. Certainly want to thank all of our sponsors that bring you our Coaches Shows each and every week: Jones Printing Company, Wilkinson Cadillac Chevrolet Buick GMC, Domino's, the Dairy Bar and Flame Restaurants, Farm Bureau of Tramway, Sheriff Brian Estes, and Fix It Plumbing. We want to thank all of you for listening to tonight's show. It's time for Yellow Jacket Football.